you have a small number, a genuinely small number of malcontent. Look, I want to be very precise in the way I characterize these student protesters, because they are actually, and they're legit, don't misunderstand, but they are being manipulated. These people, these young people, these students, I think are a product of the self-esteem movement that so many parents seemed to have adopted over the last generation or two. The self-esteem movement that found its way into schools. And what we have here, and I don't have kids, so you people out there disagree, you're going to have to call and correct me on this if you think I'm missing the point here, but I don't think I am. I think we have a young generation, a generation of young people that, well, let me set it up by pointing out the things they're demanding. They're demanding safe spaces at places like Yale and at Mizzou and many other college campuses. What are safe spaces? Where they are not subjected to people that disagree, and where they're not subjected to symbols that hurt their feelings, and they're not subjected to negative comments, and they're not subjected to jokes that they don't like. In other words, they're shielded and protected from reality. They are basically, I don't know any word to describe them but cowards. They're just scared to death of reality. They're scared to death of life. And they have been raised and educated to believe that it is legitimately possible to shield yourself from anything that's upsetting. And if somebody gets through that shield and succeeds in upsetting you, then they have to go. We've got to do something about them. We can't handle symbols that offend us. We can't handle speech that bothers us. We can't handle actions. We can't handle just the normal day-to-day aspects and characteristics of life. They have been shielded from them. Now, I'm not talking about the leaders of this, the Black Lives Matter. These are hardcore leftist community organizers out of the Saul Alinsky Barack Obama school, and they have manipulated these kids. They've recognized what they've got, and they're manipulating them perfectly. They have turned them into their own little army. And once they got the football team on board, do you realize how this changes college football going forward? Do you realize the pressure that's going to be brought to bear on every college football program to now get involved in politics? And if they don't, can you imagine the peer pressure that's going to be brought down on these athletes on college football teams who decide they don't want to get involved in something like this? This is going to change things forever if people don't get a handle on this. But right now, the adults are totally caving. The politically correct crowd, including manipulative adults and shielded from reality students, are running the show. The inmates are running the asylum. And it is, to me, I'm fascinated by cultural shifts, cultural evolution, because I care about the future of the country. I'm very much concerned about the kind of people we're raising, educated, how we're raising them, how we're educating them, what kind of country we're going to have when these little brats end up becoming adults and someday become the targets of the kind of treatment they are handing out. These people are no more prepared for the realities of life anywhere in the world. In fact, they may be less prepared for it than people who are not going to college. I think college is regressing. It's stunting the growth. I think it is giving these kids a false sense of their power and their security. I think it's creating a convoluted and distorted version of what's possible and what isn't. And I think it's the exact opposite of preparing them for lives as adults And I fear for what is going to happen when this country is in the hands of people like this. Not just the manipulators, but the students as well. When you read, you'll hear some of the comments, some of these students. What happened in Ferguson traumatized them. They were literally traumatized, but they don't know the truth of what happened in Ferguson. They still, like I said yesterday, most of them believe that the gentle giant was a gentle giant and that he was trying to surrender. They still don't know the truth. Do you know that the University of Missouri Law School class demanded that their exams be postponed because of the trauma they were dealing with, having watched what went down in Ferguson? And it was so close, they didn't feel protected. They didn't feel shielded. They feared the same thing could happen to them. They feared the cops could just start roaming the streets of Columbia, Missouri, and start shooting anybody they wanted. And they were so traumatized, they asked to be excused from taking the test. And what did the university do? They bent over, grabbed the ankle, said, fine and dandy. They're coddling them. They are, I mean, it's the exact opposite of the way anybody would think of a responsible way to educate kids, to raise kids, what have you. At Yale University, we've got even more evidence of the student body there being traumatized by everyday occurrences and their inability to deal with it. Jason Whitlock, of all people, has characterized it thus. Young people of all colors and economic levels are not nurtured the way they used to be. Young people are far more sensitive and vulnerable than previous generations. What rolled off of our backs crushes them. They see themselves as unwilling to take any BS. We see them as soft and unprepared for a world that has never once been fair or concerned with individual feelings. I don't subscribe to all of that, but I think it's a fairly accurate characterization of many of the students, the joiners in these protests, not the leaders. The leaders are a whole different ball of wax, just like it always is throughout liberalism. The liberal leaders are a far different breed of cat than the rank and file followers are. And I'm talking about the followers here, the average ordinary student getting caught up in all this, but it's not getting caught up. I think it's legitimate. I think they're genuinely afraid. Somebody goes driving down the street with a Confederate flag flying from the car. They get scared to death. They feel personally threatened. They demand something be done about it. And the school didn't do anything about it, so the university president had to be fired. They get scared with somebody driving around town with a Confederate flag. Well, no, scared are the leaders. This is my point. The leaders see an opportunity in this. I think there's genuine fright over this. That's my whole point. I think in some of these young people, there is a total inability to deal with anything that is outside their comfort level. What's most fascinating is the way the adults are dealing with it. And by adults, I mean the faculty and the administration.